Yes, it was basically in counterintelligence work. I was in the Army, drafted, classified for counterintelligence work for reasons I will never understand. Got into that in investigative work as an enlisted man. And after about a year, was commissioned also in counterintelligence work. Continued there in the 6th Service Command in Chicago in that type of work. And one day, to my surprise, I found myself in the main office of the G2 part of the Service Command there, which, by the way, serves several states. A man from Washington was due there, an officer, for unspecified reasons. It happened to be a day on which there was a large meeting elsewhere, and a substitute boss man was there, a colonel, and the junior man, the junior officer in the whole place was there, and that was myself. When the mysterious officer from Washington came in, it turned out that he wanted to interview all possible officers with the purpose of recruiting one to represent a new project that was coming up. And he wanted a contact point in that office for that project. It hadn't been realized either what he had on his mind or that there would be only myself, aside from the boss man, in the entire office. And I soon, therefore, found myself being interviewed by this man who spoke in very vague terms about a secret new organization which would be growing, and they would need not just one man ultimately, but more representation, a local office in Chicago for that purpose. Since there was no one else to interview but myself, he interviewed me. And it seemed that I would do for the purpose. I'm sure he was disappointed they had only had one candidate, but that's one of the chances you take when you don't tell people ahead of time why you're coming to see them. At any rate, he said that he would he would suggest my name as that contact point. In the meantime, he wanted to introduce me to someone that represented that project locally, named Compton. And I said, Arthur Compton? Yes. I knew about Arthur Compton's field, and I thought, what is this? But nevertheless, he took me down there to meet Compton so that I would be able to do my contact man work down there at the university. On the way down, I told him that not many years previously, I'd been a tent mate of Arthur Compton Jr. at a boys' camp in northern Wisconsin. It was indeed the son of the man I was on the way down to meet. And not only that, but I'd seen him a couple of times, younger Compton, in a Chicago club. We'd met there on the weekend to talk about camp and have a swim in the club upstairs and lunch in the grill. And so I had already had this contact with the Compton's family. We met Compton, and I was introduced to Compton's general assistant, Professor Hilberry, who for years was, or for some time, was a good friend and an invaluable contact down there. And it was like that, and I was told that the officer from Washington had left a top secret letter for the local Chicago Service Command's information saying this new contact person we have is going to be around, and he's representing a very high priority contact. Take good care of him, giving all the help and equipment he needs. An office will eventually be set up. He'll be full-time then and have this office under his supervision. That came true. It happened, and the business picked up. It was very lax for some months because this was very early. I stayed with them first full time. Presently, there were many other goings on in the several states represented by this office. A large Chrysler plant in Detroit, 2 Allis-Chalmers plants in Milwaukee, Mallinckrodt Chemical in St. Louis, another big plant in Decatur, Illinois, and also a large research program at Ames, Iowa, so that this grew into many thousands of employees and something like 6 locations, and so that I had small branch offices all over the Middle West with a huge number of employees in the general business, except for the research programs, of constructing large programs on 24-hour construction schedules for the general purpose of supplying to Oak Ridge and Hanford the equipment and materials they needed in order to do their job, so that the necessary products could be amassed and finally go to Los Alamos into making the actual weapons. That went on for a couple of years and was a thriving organization. We had our separate offices everywhere, kept in touch with both Washington and Oak Ridge, which was in the organization chart over us and between us and Washington for most things. At any rate, much later, I was sitting in the office. We had by then had all of our plants going. Bear in mind, when I'm not presiding over these plants for all purposes, but just for the security aspects of what they needed. I was sitting there busily in Chicago one day, and another call came from the same man who had recruited me initially, and he said, "Tom, Pierre De Silva, the officer who was my counterpart in Los Alamos itself, has taken another position, and we want you to succeed him. Can you be out there next Thursday?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I'm in the Army. They'd like you to say that." And I was. He was leaving promptly. I had just 2 weeks overlap with him. That made me the intelligence officer at Los Alamos, with not so many individual manufacturing plants, but there was plenty going on at Los Alamos. And among those things was the bomb test, which was just a few months away. And I learned with dismay that this would be or they hoped this would be a major event with a very high TNT equivalent blast. The technical work was proceeding well, and it seemed that it would be on time. My role in that situation was to see that whether this bomb went or took half of the state of New Mexico into the air and perhaps into flights around the world. No one knew, but that wasn't my job. My job was to see that whatever happened, nobody noticed. And so we set to work on that. In the meantime, we had various other problems in personnel security clearance situation, and high personnel problems there that needed looking after rather desperately. This was a critical time in the history of the project, and it was necessary to see that security and everything else did not impede anything. This went on, and I had particular contacts with Robert Oppenheimer, and he was having some misgivings at that time. One of my charges was to see that things went smoothly there, and I'm glad to say that we became good friends, and things went smoothly on that score. The test itself came off. It was a very busy time, and I think we had some luck. It turned out that yes, a few things naturally happened. Some people saw this test, which was quite early in the morning before dawn, and I was there in my case, I viewed the situation from the top floor of the Hilton Hotel in Albuquerque, and had people circled around the test site as far down as El Paso, Amarillo, Texas, and so on, so that we were in touch during the interval before the test and immediately after, getting calls from the situation and seeing if anything unusual and unexpected might have occurred, in which case we would be in a very good position from the standpoint of communications. We were in touch with the test site itself, where there were observers present, including General Groves and Oppenheimer and many VIP spectators, as well as some of Los Alamos' staff people were on duty down there. General Groves called me to see how things were going and to let us know that it worked, which we already knew because the initial flash of white light from the explosion was brilliant, even in Albuquerque, many miles north, followed, of course, by the immense red condition of the sky, which immediately followed the white flash and took quite a while to like a slow sunset kind of effect as it went down. Then there were the general wanted me to go over to Kirtland Air Force Base at once to say, you already have a stop order on all air traffic in a certain area. You are hereby instructed to continue to keep all air traffic out of that area until further notice. I went over there and in civilian clothes because that was the thing to do in that particular assignment, but without having shaved recently yet, and told him to keep traffic out of. I think he wondered a little bit who I was, but I luckily had my intelligence credentials for showing me in civilian clothes also, and that worked too. I stayed with that situation then, and Oppenheimer and others left, of course, after a few weeks after the surrender of Japan, which of course followed that, and we were naturally involved in that, and traffic between Los Alamos and Wendover Field, where the planes were homed, which ultimately dropped the bombs and that sort of thing. I stayed in the Army after that to take part in the Manhattan Project's part in the first peaceful atomic bomb tests out in Kwajalein in the Pacific. We had laboratory ships and that sort of thing with largely Los Alamos people. So I went out for that occasion and stayed in the Army that long, which meant that I saw 3 of the first 5 bomb blasts and found it a very interesting thing. After the Bikini tests, I returned to home, and I was discharged from the Army and returned to civilian life. Well, the first thing to know is that we developed and put into action a new type of weapon of unprecedented qualities. And we know also that the results of research and development did not stop there. The weapon is already almost unbelievably more powerful than the Model T models that we used. And this kind of thing can go on indefinitely in taking different directions. And other things equally impressive will be developed also. This means it is increasingly imperative that we understand that in my particular case, I believe we have here a force going that has the capability of ending the human race's time of living on this planet. Particularly if we get that sort of weapon into the new type of attack that featured September 11, the terror approach. It has derived from the atomic bomb program and can take all kinds of new twists and turns. It will require a realization and an alertness on which we have not kept up the techniques that we should have, and it will be important to take care of our lack and to see that public opinion realizes the dangers of this and the importance and delicacy of the diplomatic and other work that has to go along with this.